Hello, welcome to the IEPPV Live. My name is Troy Miller with SpicyJello.com, and I normally do the live introductions for these events and ask questions throughout the event. Unfortunately, I had a shoot that night. I was not able to attend in the beginning. I do come in a little bit later, so you'll see that. IEPPV Live is an event that we do once a month, so please check out the IEPPV.com website so you can see when those topics are going to be coming up and what's going to be happening. Stephen Scharf is our instructor in this particular event. He's a good friend of mine. I met him through the TWIP Pro community. That's from thisweekinphoto.com. Very worth checking out if you haven't done that. So without any further ado, enjoy.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Troy. So my name's Stephen Scharf. I met Troy last year, almost about a year ago now, when I joined Frederick Van Johnson's TWIP Pro network, and we've become good friends in the interim. And I've recently been starting and getting into architectural and real estate photography as a business. And so Troy asked me to put together a talk for you guys on architectural photography. So I'm going to talk about that today. And I'm just going to get started here with a PowerPoint presentation that I put together to go through some key things for you guys. And then I've got the question panel here open so I can see that. I'm going to go full screen here. I'm assuming everybody can see this. At the end, down at the bottom, you'll see my contact info. If you guys have questions, feel free to reach out to me. And I'll just kind of get started going through this. So I've shot architecture for quite a while. I recently retired as a scientist from a professional career, and I've been doing photography for a very long time. And as Troy knows, I've been a professionally accredited motorsports photojournalist for over 15 years now. So I have quite a bit of experience working in a professional context as a photographer. And I've always shot architecture for a long time, but just in the last year or so, I've been starting doing this at a professional level, professional basis. So I'm going to kind of take you guys through some key points, covering everything from the equipment, which I'm sure a lot of you will have questions about, and just some key areas for you. And then I'm going to, at the end, wrap up and show you how I would edit an image. And it's just going to be a photograph of my house, but just give you a flavor of how you would light a simple scene for a particular shoot. So just to get started here, I've got a little Venn diagram here that just kind of shows that architectural photography is a pretty broad discipline. And it kind of can be thought of as a Venn diagram that encompasses three kind of broad areas that you hear professionals talking about with respect to this particular genre. So there's,
Steven,
yeah.
don't see your screen as of yet.
Oh, you don't? All right. Thank you. Let me share that. All right, here we go. So you should see it now. Oh, I told it to share my desktop. Oh, there we go. Ah, great. Okay,
there we go.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Okay, so this is the first slide. You haven't missed anything. So just to back up, architecture photography is a pretty broad discipline. There's kind of three broad subdisciplines underneath it. One I would call is true commercial architectural photography, and this is generally done for architects. Architects often have their work published, and so they need photographs of their projects, and they often participate in competitions. And so big-time commercial architectural photographers like Jeffrey Tartaro, that was interviewed by Frederick Van Johnson on TWIP last year, pretty much specialize in that area. There's two other areas, designer photography or interior designer architectural photography. This is generally done for professional interior designers, builders and stagers that need their work photographed. And then there's real estate, which is probably the broadest and most widely utilized by a lot of folks. And this is both commercial real estate photography as well as personal property, houses for sale. This is an area that I'm specializing in here, particularly in the Bay Area, because we have a pretty much a red hot real estate market. We have lots of houses for sale all the time, and those houses sell for lots of money, and the agents need really good photographs as part of their key marketing for those homes for sale. So the key thing here is that each of these disciplines has unique or singular requirements, both for the type of photography you do and also the things that you do in post-processing for the images you would create. They have unique client bases, and it's really important if you are going to specialize in one of these three disciplines to really understand both the unique requirements for your customers and clients in those disciplines, as well as where they overlap. You know, the best way to kind of do that is to connect to other professionals that are working in the area, as well as your client base, and understand, you know, what they are looking for with respect to the type of work that you would be submitting for each of these particular subdisciplines. You guys are probably wondering kind of what cameras folks use. I know that there's a lot of discussion of gear nowadays on social media for photographers. The bottom line here is you can pretty much use any camera that you presently own for architectural photography, particularly in real estate or designer photography. It really does not matter. The gear nowadays is really outstanding. I've just listed here a range of cameras that you can read, but any of the professional line of Canons or even prosumer line of Canons and Nikons are more than adequate for this type of photography. And then there's a range of mirrorless offerings now, including Micro Four Thirds and APS-C. So you do not need a full frame camera. You do not need a top of the line Canon 1DX or Nikon D5 level of camera to do this. All of these cameras have features and functionality that is more than adequate for this type of photography. So my guidance is if you've got a decent camera now and you're familiar with it and you're familiar with its menus and how it works and functions, stay with that for now. You may want to change out something later if you get into, say, a more architectural or interior design or commercial work. You may want to switch to a larger or medium format camera or full frame, but you don't need to do that to get started at this point. The key thing is for any of these cameras is all the cameras nowadays have plenty of resolution for this type of work. And the key attributes that you really want to look for any of these cameras is that they have accurate white balance, and that you have some way potentially of controlling them through some sort of remote application, such as Cam Ranger, the Sony Play Memories app. The Canon has an app for theirs. I imagine Nikon has some sort of remote control app. Fuji has one, because there'll be times when you're going to be wanting to shoot tethered. And then the other key thing is it's very important that you be able to easily access the full manual mode of your camera. I'm just going to go out here full screen here and make sure that we don't have any questions from the gang. So I want to bring up just real quick the...
We're good.
We're good? Okay, great.
I'll keep monitoring.
All right, great. Because you're going to shoot entirely in manual mode when you do architectural or real estate photography. So if you're not comfortable with that, I recommend you spend some time or maybe take a course or a workshop in shooting in full manual. Many times the lenses that are used for architectural or real estate photography or designer photography are only manual focus. For example, tilt shift lenses are only manual focus lenses. I use right now currently a little Rokinon 12mm prime that's manual focus. Many other photographers use that lens as well because it's inexpensive and wide enough. And then typically the key attributes for the lenses that you want to use are wide angles. You're typically going to be working in the range in a 35mm field of view equivalent of around 16 to 35 millimeters most of the time. The only exception to that would be if you're taking exterior photographs where you might want something like a standard zoom, like a 24 to 70. But those are primarily the two lenses you would use 100% of the time, a 16 to 35 equivalent focal range and say a 24-70. And then if you have the funds and you get more seriously into this, tilt shift lenses are really helpful. Stan had a question about focus stacking. You don't really need to do focus stacking in these types of environments because you're going to be shooting at f8, typically f7.1 on an APS-C or micro four thirds, and f8 on full frame. So you're going to have plenty of depth of field at f8. Typically, anything from 3 feet in front of the lens of the camera to infinity is going to be in focus. So I've never had an issue where any of the key aspects of the subjects of a room, the furniture, the amenities, or whatever, the fireplace, are out of focus. So with these wide angles at f8, shooting at say 16, 18, 20 millimeters, you're going to have plenty of depth of field. Stan, I'm going to talk about HDR when I get around to lighting, but the answer to that question is no, and I'll talk more about that in just a few minutes. Thank you for the question for that. So, okay, next slide here. So, all of the work that I do is both a mix of ambient and lights. All the top pros use a mix of ambient lighting and lighting from Speedlites or other similar lights like the Godox AD200 Listro or the Flashpoint Cheetah lights. There's a whole range of lights. We've got amazing tools now that are inexpensive and affordable that give us all the light that we need. You see here a list of examples that I've just given. These are typically those that are most widely used in the industry. I shoot entirely with Speedlites, Yongnuo Speedlites. They're about $54 each. I've got 4 of them. They've got built-in receivers, and then you can get transmitters inexpensively to control those. And then I just shoot with either 1, 2, or 3 lights, depending on the situation for my lighting. I'm going to go into more detail about this, but the key thing with lighting is you're going to need some lights. You can start out with inexpensive Speedlights for now. If you're shooting larger spaces, like you're going to start doing more commercial work or architectural work, you're going to need something like a Godox AD600 or a 360 street light. The AD200 will probably get you by in some situations as well. But in larger rooms with taller ceilings, like a large office space, you're going to need more lighting power, and you won't be able to get by with just ambient. In terms of the stands, a lot of photographers actually shoot with small tripods, small light tripods. I'll show you some examples of that later. And then many photographers shoot with Manfrotto light stands. These are good for the bigger lights like the Godox AD200s and the AD600 monolights. That's pretty much what everybody uses, are small light tripods that they can place in different parts of a room. They typically put Speedlights on these light tripods and then Manfrotto or similar Coupeau light stand for larger lights like monolights or AD200s, things like that. Many companies make great stands. Coupeau makes some stands, but you don't need to get into the whole Studio C stand thing. They're going to be too big and bulky to get in and out of these spaces. So pretty much everyone uses good quality folding light stands like Manfrotto, and also a lot of folks use small light tripods. You'll see a picture of that a little bit later. It can be helpful to have a shoot-through umbrella when you need to modify the light a little bit, but that's only used occasionally. And then you want some way of triggering the lights. Used to be that you used to have optical slaves for your flashes, but nowadays pretty much everything has built-in receivers or transceivers and transmitters. The Yongnuos, for example, the $54 ones have built-in receivers, and you could buy a transmitter for $37 and control your lights that way. The Godox has their own system of triggers, which are also inexpensive. And then the nice thing about the Godox system is that one trigger, the X Pro trigger, will work with any of the Godox lights, including Speedlights, the AD200 Listro, the AD600s, and the streak lights. So that one trigger will work with your more powerful lights as well. And then it can be useful to have an iPad or a tablet when you're using remote apps like Cam Ranger. Of course, you want plenty of batteries. And if you're going to be shooting architectural office spaces, in particular where there's a lot of offices now have glass conference rooms, you're going to want a polarizer filter and filter holder, because you're going to want to be able to cut reflections out of windows for those office or commercial spaces where there's many times now glassed enclosed office rooms. Tripods are essential. Everything is done on a tripod in architectural real estate photography. The only time you might not use a tripod is if you're doing exterior photographs of, say, a house or something like that. But all the interior work is done on a tripod. And the most important thing about a tripod, I can say, is buy the best quality tripod you can possibly afford. You want something that's well-made, durable, reliable, sturdy, and stable. That's really, really key, because what you really want to do, you can think of architectural and real estate designer photography as the equivalent of working on what professionals do is a lockdown set. And so your tripod is basically the foundation for creating a lockdown set for your architectural photography. So you want something that's stable, that's not going to move, and most importantly, won't fall over or shift or have any wiggle in it. And then an L bracket for your camera is also very essential so that you can shoot both in landscape orientation, which you do most of the time, but occasionally you might need to move your camera into portrait orientation. And in those cases, you want to keep everything optically centered. And so an L bracket is really the only way to do that. So this is just a list of tripods. Again, I would really recommend a quality tripod from Gizzo, Manfrotto, Benro, and Duro. Really right stuff. Whatever you can afford for your budget. There's lots of good tripods out now. But don't skip on a cheap, $35 aluminum tripod or something like that. It's just going to fall apart on you. It's going to wiggle and move around, and it's going to shift very slightly in between frames. And then when you try to align things in Photoshop, you're going to have a nightmare of a problem. So sturdy, stable, quality tripods are essential. The other thing that's very important is that they have rubber feet. I'm talking about really practical things. Some tripods, like the Manfrotto 3046 that I use, have a spiked foot that you can screw out. So if you're shooting in outside in landscape or on rough terrain, you can use the spiked feet to get a secure footing. You really want to make sure that if you have a tripod like that where spiked feet can screw out, that you screw them in and secure them, because the last thing you want to do is to damage a floor with a spiked foot that has accidentally extended itself, because you could be looking at a $100,000 or $200,000 liability for damaging a floor in $1 million home or office space or something like that. So I've actually locked mine down with blue Loctite so they cannot come out. And then lastly, you want to make sure that both for the camera that you choose, the lenses, and the other gear like tripods, that those companies have reliable service and support infrastructure so you can get things repaired, you can get spare parts and things like that. All just really practical stuff.
We did have a question, Stephen. What about long exposures if you don't have lighting?
You're going to need to use lighting. There's just no getting around it. You can use long exposures if you have to shoot ambient. And there are some photographers I know that are requested only to shoot ambient. If you are going to shoot ambient with long exposures, all the more reason that you need to be working on a sturdy, stable tripod with a good head. So you certainly can take a second long exposure or whatever it takes and do that. But for the most part, you're going to be wanting to work with a mix of ambient and flash lighting. And then the other thing that's key here, I want to make sure I get through all the gear as quickly as I can. I would say 95% of professional architectural real estate photographers use a geared head. I've shown some examples here, but the key thing is that you basically can have very tight control over what I call the geometric composition to make sure that you're perfectly square in the frame, both in terms of level and then yaw, which is basically the camera swinging, the lens swinging left to right slightly, and then pitch, which is forward, up, and down. And all these geared heads give you very precise control over leveling the picture before you take it. So highly recommend those. You can get them as cheaply as $199, and I use the Benro that you see there. You can go up to $1,100, $1,500 if you want to go full on Arca Swiss, but really recommend a geared head for your compositions so that, and again, the nice thing about a geared head is the camera will not move even slightly between successive frames. So when you do your stacking of your layers in Photoshop and you're blending your ambient and flash exposures, everything will be in as good alignment as possible. So I really recommend a good geared head. If not, if you're going to use a ball head, make sure that it's tight and secure and there's no wiggle in it, because sometimes they wear out, the screws get loose in the mounting for the ball head, things can shift. Even if it shifts a fraction of a millimeter, you're going to be dealing with trying to fix problems in post with your layers not aligning. This is the best geared head you can get. This is if you get seriously into architectural photography, you can get the Arca Swiss Cube. I won't really go into that. You can read about that later. The other key thing here is a good quick release clamp. I've shown a really bright stuff one here. Almost everybody uses these. And then an L bracket. There's many folks that make L brackets now. Just get a good one that mounts to your camera securely. I really recommend an L bracket. So again, you can put that camera in portrait orientation and maintain the optical centeredness of your camera relative to the center of the tripod. So this is just a picture showing my camera setup here. Really quickly, this is my Fuji X-T2 on my Benro head. You can see I've got a really bright stuff L plate on it. And this is the system, it's mounted on my Manfrotto tripod here. So this is my setup that I use for my real estate and architectural work. And then I've got here the flash and transmitter. So I've got a little Yongnuo RF603C2 in the hot shoe. And there's a reason for that, I'll explain in just a minute. And then the Yongnuo TX560 transmitter on top of that in its hot shoe. And the TX560 lets me control the flash power from the camera, so I don't have to walk over to the flash and change the power. I can do it right from the camera. And then the little RF603 below is actually a controller that will actually actuate the camera shutter. There's a little port right here on the left. You can see a little hole here, and you could plug a cable into the camera's remote cable actuation port on the side, and you can control the camera from another RF603. So you can basically have a remote in your hand and trigger both the flashes and the camera. This just shows my lighting setup here. So this is what I use for the majority of my work. Here's a little Sunpack tripod I was referring to earlier with a Yongnuo flash on it. It's just mounted onto a little quick release plate there. And then you see the camera with the two triggers. One will trigger the camera and then also the transmitter, and then the transmitter controls the power on the flashes. And I put a little video for you guys to watch down there. You can link to that after the webinar and see how that all works. That's self-explanatory. The key thing is I can hold these little Yongnuo RF603s are cheap. You can get 2 of them for $27 from B&H. And there's a little button on it that serves like a shutter button on your camera, so you can depress it halfway. You've got an autofocus lens on the camera, it will focus the lens. But the other thing is it will actuate the shutter and trigger the flash at the same time, so you can be off away from the camera, maybe holding another light or positioning another light and still take a photograph with your little remote in your hand. So that's how it typically works. All right, we're going to talk a bit here about compositions really quickly in terms of setting up. The key thing here on this slide I really want to talk about is you want to make sure that you use a lens that has minimal barrel or pincushion distortion. All lenses, particularly the wider ones, might suffer from this to some degree, so you want to be mindful of correcting that in post. And then it's very critical that you check your verticals when you're framing, particularly if you raise the lens up higher than about 3.5 or 4 feet high. The walls will start to converge at the bottom. If you've got a framing guide, many of the mirrorless cameras now are great because they've got framing guides and rule of thirds grid, so you can use those as guides to check that you're straight. So the key thing is you want the camera to be straight in square effectively with the scene that you're photographing, both vertically and horizontally. So you want your horizontals truly level and straight. And then you want to make sure the camera is dead on in terms of where it's pointing, because if the camera is pointing slightly off axis, that is, it has some yaw in it, that the front of the lens is slightly turned either to the left or right. When you look at the horizontals along the edge of a wall or the top of a ceiling, even though the camera may be perfectly horizontal and level, you'll see that the horizontals will start to converge, and that's because the lens is not pointing dead on straight. So you want to make sure that that's all square. And again, using a geared head is really, really helpful for this. So this is the first thing you want to be mindful of. You can correct some of this in post, like barrel and pincushion distortion, but you want to try to get it as right in camera as you can. Any questions about this so far? It looks like we don't have any questions. So I'm just going to keep rolling along here. Okay. So camera position and height. Most of the shots that are taken with the camera about 3.5 to 4.5 feet high. In some cases, you're going to have to raise the camera up when you want to shoot over a table or a counter or a desk and you want to show the back of a room or an office or a kitchen or a living room, whatever you're shooting. You want to show the space. A key requirement for either architectural or real estate or designer photography is you want to make the space look as spacious as possible, as accurately as possible. So you don't want to make it look more spacious than it really is, but you want to show the space that's there. But as you raise your camera up from say 3.5 to 4.5 feet high, as you raise it up more and more, a normal lens is going to start to get an effect where the walls will start to converge more at the bottom as you raise the camera more and more, and you keep the lens pointed in the same direction. So the best way to deal with those converging verticals is with a tilt shift lens, but that's a pretty specialized lens. Most folks don't use that except for the real high-end architectural or real estate photographers will use a tilt shift lens in those situations. If you don't have one, I don't have one yet, I may get one in the future, but if you don't have one, you want to, if you're using a zoom, say like a 16 to 35, you want to rack out your focal length a little bit, take a slightly wider angle so that when you correct the verticals in post, it's going to crop in a little bit and you don't want to lose any kind of real estate, so to speak, of your shot in the frame when you have to fix the converging verticals in post. And we'll talk about that when I go through the workflow in post. So compositions, the most common composition for real estate and architectural is what's called a two-wall. It basically shows two walls of a given scene or a room. The nice thing about this is it shows enough of the room to give a feeling for the size and the orientation of the room. It leaves some room for imagination, but it doesn't put constraints on the room size. And you can use it, as I've shown here, to have views into other rooms that help lead the viewer through the space that you're trying to photograph. So here you see a nice, this was a house I shot in January. It's a big 4,000 square foot mansion in an elite golf club community type of place. And you can see the dining room here, and you can see into the living room as well. So this is a classic two-wall perspective. The other one that's very common is what's called a single point or one-point shot, where the camera axis is dead on, straight and square with the room or space. So you see an example of that here. This is sometimes nice to kind of just show how rooms connect, as the living room might lead to a dining room, or maybe a hallway leads to an office space or something like that. And these are often used as well, but they can be tricky because you've got to get the geometric composition exactly right, because you've now got three walls. You've got to make sure your walls are vertical, your horizontals are horizontal, nothing is tilted or twisted in the photograph. And so you've got to be very, very careful with making sure that everything is dead on square when you take this particular photograph. The other one I don't have an example of right here, but I can speak to, is a three-wall shot. And those are usually not done because oftentimes, unless you have a tilt shift lens or a particular angle of the room, you'll start to get a convergence at the back of the room when you're starting to show three walls, and that can kind of make the room look a bit like a fun house where, you know, one part of the room is wider and bigger than the other, and then it converges down to some weird, odd shape or geometric orientation. And so you usually don't shoot three walls except in certain circumstances where maybe showing a third wall would be useful. And you've got to be very careful again with the geometric composition so that you don't get a funhouse look. You might have a third wall, for example, that looks out into a meeting space or another meeting room, or a space outside or something like that. But those are generally not used very frequently because you can get into weird geometric composition issues with those. So I'm going to talk about lighting here really quickly. The key thing for lighting, again, when you're using lights, you're going to be using a mix of an ambient exposure and a flash exposure to help balance out the ambient light. This will help with the color temperature. And then sometimes you'll do a third exposure for what's called a window pull, where you want to pull in the scene outside of the window so you can see outside the window as well. So generally, the simplest type of photograph that you might take would be 2 exposures, 1 ambient exposure, 1 lit exposure, and then possibly a third exposure for pulling in detail outside of a window. The key principle for lighting is you want your lighting placed off axis. To the axis of the camera lens, whether it's off the camera left or right or straight up, just shooting straight up at the ceiling. But what you don't want is the flash on camera shooting from behind the camera or on the camera straight forward, because that will give you a very flashy looking scene. That's going to be very hard to correct in post because everything is going to be lit in an unnatural looking way. So the key thing here is, again, off axis lighting. Just a little slide here on showing how flash power falls off. Light, as some of you may know, obeys this law called the inverse square law. So as you go a certain distance, the light falls off by the square of the distance. So you can see a flash here immediately next to the flash, you have half power. If you go, say, from 2 feet away from the flash to 4 feet away, that flash power is going to fall off by 1/4. So as you go further and further out, you're going to lose power with distance, and it's not going to be linear. It's going to be with the square of the distance. So you do want to be mindful of that. The nice thing is that as the flash power falls off, it starts to become more even. So when you're down in the half to quarter and sometimes eighth power, you're going to get this softer, more even light in your room or your scene or your office or wherever you might be, and that will help to give a more natural look. So you want to take advantage of the fact that the flash, as it gets farther away from the subject in the room, will start to even out and soften out and give you a nicer looking, more natural looking lighting. So this is just a slide I put together to kind of show. Here you see the camera with the lens axis. Typically you might have your flash off to the side. Here it's off axis to 90 degrees. It's along a wall here. And you can see that this flash, when it goes off, will kind of light one portion of the room in this way. This is just a graphic example. It's not perfectly accurate, but it gives you an idea of how also the light will fall off. And then you might have a flash on the other side of the room as well if it's a large room and you don't get enough fill. And then you can blend those two photographs together to get the room evenly lit from your 2 flash exposures and your ambient exposure together. So you don't always need to do this, but sometimes you can. I'm going to show you guys an example of that when I take you through an example in post, where I just did that in my little living room in my small townhome here. But this general principle will cover you in a vast majority of situations.
So there were two questions, Stephen.
Yeah.
The power for flash, is it manual or is it going TTL?
That's a very good question. You're going to be shooting entirely in manual for the flash. You don't want to use TTL. It's going to mess up trying to balance your lighting ratios. So everything is done in full manual with the flashes. And this is nice because this is going to save you. You don't have to buy TTL flashes. You can buy these inexpensive Yongnuo flashes or the Godox 8200s. They all work in manual, and you can be shooting everything in manual. And I think I've got a slide here on the flash power. But it's going to be hard to estimate how much power you're going to need because it's all going to be dependent on the room, the color of the walls, the color of the ceiling. And how many lights you're going to need will be, of course, dependent on the size of the room. But everything's done in manual. So you're going to be doing manual exposure on the camera and manual power on the flash, no TTL. Again, this is the way that professionals work in studios with flashes as well, as they shoot in full manual. Yes, so somebody said the wall is a bounce, and I guess a light meter. I'm not sure what that question is
Do you
about.
utilize a light meter for?
You know, I just use, you could use a flash meter or an exposure like a Sekonic to do that if you want, but I just use the light meter in the camera, and it works out really well. So you could do that if you want to get crazy about it, but most professionals just use the exposure reading on the cameras today to balance and check their lighting with both the ambient exposure and the flash. That's a pretty good question.
Got it. Last question that we still had was, do you use a gray card for white balance? Do you use a gray card?
You can. I would recommend that you do that, especially if you've got, I was shooting a house in December and it had all these crazy colors on the walls. It had like burnt sienna on one wall and brown on another, and the ceiling was tan or beige, and then another wall was like a light orange brown color. It was crazy. And it was just kicking all sorts of different colors of light around the room. So that was very hard to balance out. So a gray card would have been really helpful there. I recommend WHIBAL cards, W-H-I-B-A-L. They're small plastic cards that are very accurate. You can carry them in your pocket. They're small, about the size of a credit card. They've got a black card, a white card, and 2 gray cards. So I would recommend a WHIBAL. I don't use one personally. The reason is the white balance on my Fujis is really, really good, the auto white balance. Canon has exceptional white balance, auto white balance. The 5D Mark IV, for example, has a mode that you can put it in that just nails the white balance perfectly. Maybe Troy afterwards can speak to the white balance on his Nikon D5s and his 850. I've heard it's pretty good and pretty solid, but for the most part, most cameras today have pretty good auto white balance, but you can fix all of that in post as well. So you don't need to nail the white balance perfectly. If you get it reasonably close, then you're good enough. Yeah, somebody said they have an 850, it's solid. That might be Troy or somebody else, but that's fine. So if you want to use a gray card or a white balance card, that's great, but it's not critical, and I don't personally use one. Very good question, though. Okay. So I just want to speak to this. This is something I took from Nathan Kuhl's book. He's got some books. I've got references for them in the back there on lighting. He calls the distant diamond technique, and you've got a room here, basically. This is your composition area. You see that this is a classic 2-wall shot composition. So you've got the distant wall and the wall on the right, which you're photographing. Your camera's in the corner of the room. It's a very common setup. The camera's generally in the corner of a room, and then your flash point here is off to the right. The reason here is that the distance between the flash for the far wall at the back and the far wall on the right are about the same, and that's going to give you fairly even light for the back wall and the far right wall. If you have the flash over there on the left, you're going to have a shorter distance between that flash and the back wall, and that's going to mean the back wall is going to be quite a bit brighter than the side wall, and so you don't really want your flash in that position. Sometimes you have to do it, but that's not recommended. So this is a really nice diagram that kind of shows a very common, and then you can also see here that this flash is off axis at 90 degrees almost to the lens. So you're in a good position with respect to the flash being off axis, and also lining up the room in a way that you're going to get fairly even lighting on both the far wall and the side walls as well. Okay, let's see. When I'm on the Q&A thing, it doesn't advance my slide. So here's my living room. I just took these photographs over the weekend. This is just, for example, I'm going to use this as an example and post here to show you guys, but this is my living room, my small townhome. And you can see my camera set up, and then I've got my Yongnuo on my little Sunpack tripod. It's just sitting on my coffee table, and it's going to fire up to the ceiling where the ceiling joins the wall, and it's going to kick that light. The reason I want to do this is I want to emulate the light coming in through that window on the left that you can see there, so that I get very logical shadows from that additional flash that's going to help me with the ambient light and give me a look from the flash that emulates the ambient light coming in through the window from the side. So you can see my speaker there, that the right side of the speaker's got some logical shadow on it. little cubicle where my stairwell is. It's got a shadow near that little window right in here. There's some logical shadow here. And you can see the light coming in basically across from the left into the living room here. So you want to balance this as natural a way as you can. So when I kick the light up off to the left and it bounces back down, it's going to come down across from the left to the right and give me a logical, natural looking light fill, even though it's flash. And then on the right here, I've got, you see in the right panel here, I've got my speedlight set up on the other side of my living room here, and I've got it pointing up basically the intersection of my ceiling here with this wall and the ceiling, and that's going to kick it across from the right. And then I can blend those two together to get even fill across the room. Typically, because the main window's on the left, I probably would dial the power on this right flash down a little bit so the fill doesn't look too unnatural. So if the flash on the left was, say, at half power for this small room, this might be at a quarter or eighth power, depending on the size of the room, just to give me a little fill on the side. So I've got a main light here on the left that you see, and then this is my key light, and then my fill light would be over here on the right, just to fill in on the left side there.
So, Stephen, do you always bounce the light? I mean, is that, or do you ever use directional light? So it's always bounced or diffused in some way by bouncing it within the room.
That's exactly right.
So you're not using umbrellas or any kind of diffuser. You just use the room itself.
Sometimes you will need to use an umbrella, not very often, maybe 5% of the time. The problem with the umbrella, Troy, is it's going to be very directional. It's going to cast shadows on ceiling fans, things like that, and then you're going to have to do multiple pops so that you can paint out the shadow from the fan one way versus another way. So occasionally, but mostly you're bouncing off the walls.
Got it.
And then that's going to be your modifier, and it's going to give you a nice broad spread of light. And as you bounce that wall off that wall and come back down, it's going to soften out because it's going to spread out and soften really nicely, give you nice even feel.
Right. I'm usually bouncing off the walls anyway. So
exactly right. Yep. Same idea. So I got that joke.
Yeah. No, this is the exact same lighting that I use on wedding days. I mean, when I walk into a bride's room, you point that flash in the corner. It's brilliant. You don't need to put a lot of stuff on your camera. So.
No, and you don't need modifiers either. You can just use, bare heads, as the saying goes. Right. So the exteriors, I'm going to cover this really quickly because I want to get into a quick example in post so that we can take some questions at the end. Most exteriors are going to depend on your lighting conditions. I usually shoot on a tripod. That's just me. Some guys shoot, like Peter Lyons, my good buddy, Peter Lyons, and then Barry McKenzie shoot handheld. There, again, you're going to be using ISO 200 or 400 typically, depending on your lighting. Your aperture, again, is going to be at f8, and you're going to use the shutter speed to get your exposure. You want the aperture to get your depth of field, your ISO to keep your noise levels down, and then most exterior shots are going to be ambient light, unless you're shooting twilight shots. One of my buddies, Peter Lyons, does light painting on the exterior of a house sometimes, so he'll basically paint with the light during a long exposure, or he'll do flash pops and then mask them in around the house. Particularly if it gets really dark and you start to lose the detail on the house, some guys will do flash pops around the house to get the exterior of a structure, for example.
A question. Are you worried about flash hot spots, like on glass, like reflections?
That's a very good question. Yes, you are. And so sometimes what you have to do is position the flash in two different places so that you can paint out in a layer mask where the reflection is on the glass with one flash exposure by having the other one on the other side that's not reflecting because the flash is in a different place. And then you can paint them out in your layer mask. That's more of an advanced thing, but yes, there's a way to manage that. Or you could just lower the flash sometimes to reposition it so it doesn't reflect back into a window. This is just a quick real estate exterior shot just to kind of show you what an example might look like. This is kind of a hero shot for the house. Shows the walkway for the house, nice tree, clouds, all the good stuff. You get an idea of the size and the scale of the house. And then here is a twilight shot that I did back in January. So it's nice. You can see the lights on in the house. You've got beautiful color. You've got a sense of what the exterior looks like and the land around the house and the beautiful trees and and plants and things like that. So agents love this kind of stuff. They will pay you extra money to do this. This is something you can add a surcharge for. Somebody asked a question about, am I not worried about, oh yeah, well, I answered that question, okay. Okay, so interior exposures, I'm gonna really try to go through this quickly. Again, you're pretty much just gonna be using shutter speed for your exposure. Almost everyone I know shoots at ISO 400 and aperture f7.1 or f8. 90% of the guys I know shoot under those conditions. So the only thing you're going to be using to control exposure is your shutter speed. Again, as Troy knows, when you're using flash or ambient, but primarily flash, your shutter speed is what controls how you're going to mix the ambient and the flash together. So typically your ambient shutter speed is going to be in the range of an eighth to a 30th of a second. And then you're going to maybe go up 2 stops. Your flash exposure might be 1/30th, 1/60th, maybe 1/20th of a second or 1/25th of a second. It all depends on the lighting and how much flash power you have. So you're going to have to play with that. There's no hard and fast rules about that. It's going to depend on your flash power, the size of the room, the height of the ceilings, the color of the walls, all of that stuff. But generally your flash exposure, you're going to stop down 2 stops. So if you're shooting an interior at 1/8 of a second, you might stop down to 1/30th, 1/40th of a second, 1/50th of a second for your flash pop, and then you can blend those, and they will generally work out pretty well in terms of being even amount of luminance in the scene. This is just a 2-wall view showing the distant diamond technique. This is just a house I shot again, that the Twilight shot you saw. I've got the flash basically off to my right here, off axis, and it's lighting up this room. And then I've got another flash you can't see around the corner that's lighting up the kitchen for fill as well, just to light up the entire space here. So again, this is just an example of that distant diamond technique, showing you how nicely it works. This is just an example of using 2 lights, 1 main and 1 fill. So I basically, again, off to camera right, on the right side of the camera, I have a flash that's right alongside me, and it's pointing up and against the wall that's behind me, and it's kicking light forward into the living room. And then there's a little light, you can't see it, but there's a little light at low power set up on the stairs off to camera right to the right side of the door. That's basically kicking light into the doorway in that alcove as you come into the house, just to get a little bit of fill there. So 1 main light, I'm making a lot of use of the ambient light coming in from the windows. I think this shot was maybe at 1/30th of a second at f7.1, and my flash power was probably half power on the main, and probably 1/16th on the fill, just to fill in that little bit of area there in the living. You can see how nicely, as you use the ambient to do the heavy lifting, you get a really nice balance. So this doesn't even look like it has flash in it, but it does. It has actually 2 flashes going off. Another example of just using 1 main and 1 fill light. I've actually got a light now here in the kitchen, or in the dining room, behind the fireplace, filling in that room, and then I've got 1 main light off to the left here that's basically coming down from the side and lighting up the living room here. Okay. Somebody says, are you not worried about, oh, that's the same question. All right, let's get into post-processing. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you guys an example here. You can read this, but bottom line is, if I were doing architectural work, I'd be doing all my global adjustments in Capture One. As Troy knows, Capture One rocks when it comes to having surgical control over your edits for your raw files. I really like it a lot. But for real estate, I typically use Lightroom only because it allows me to have a faster workflow. And there's one principal reason I use Lightroom for real estate work rather than Capture One right now, in that it has a feature called Edit as Layers in Photoshop. So you can do your global edits in Lightroom really quickly. You can copy paste settings for, setting your black and white point, your color temperature, etc. And then you can select your 3 frames. You can select them all at once and then right click and say edit as layers in Photoshop, and it will open those 3 frames as layers in Photoshop. So you're good to go. I wish Capture One did this. There's a workaround for that where you can use a script in Photoshop for that. But I am going to write to Capture One, Troy, about that. See if they will implement that so I can work entirely in Capture One. But Lightroom or Capture One both work fine. And then you can export to Photoshop or Affinity Photo for compositing, blending. But primarily all your post-processing is going to be done in Photoshop. I'm going to give you guys a quick example of that right now and take you through that just live. So I'm going to escape out of this. At the end of this deck, just make sure, I don't know if I'll have time to speak to marketing. There's information here on marketing. Get Seth Godin's book, This is Marketing, and read that book. It's really, really good. And then there's information here on training references for YouTube and then training courses that you can refer to. So I'm going to skip out of.
Yeah, we can go back if we have a little bit of time, but I can also include a lot of that in the show notes.
Yes.
When it goes up on YouTube. So if you guys missed a slide or any of those links or anything, don't panic.
It's all there.
Yeah, just focus on Steven's voice for right now, and we'll get all that stuff to you later. We'll make sure you get it.
Okay, so here's an example. I'm just going to take you guys through a really quick edit in 5 minutes.
You're good. You're good. You take your time.
All right, cool. I didn't know if we had a hard cutoff at an hour or not, but if people are interested, I'm happy to stay a little, whatever past folks want to do. So this is, I'll just go back here. I've got 3 frames here that you can see in Lightroom. I've got an ambient. I've got my left flash shot and my right flash shot just on those slides that you saw previously. What I'm going to do is I'm going to edit these for you in Photoshop and just show you how you can blend these to get a nice looking photograph at the end. So the nice thing, as I mentioned, is I'm pretty happy with how this is exposed in terms of white balance. I might bring up the develop module here, make sure that I'm not clipping with respect to this photograph. It looks like I'm clipping the highlight just a little. I'll bring that down a little bit here, so I'm not clipping. I'm clipping the blacks a little. Sometimes I'll set the black point by holding down the Option key. Just do that. Okay, I might bring up the shadows, the whites just a little bit here. This is my midtones, but I'm starting to blow out the windows, as you can see there in red. So I'll just call that good for now. We've got plenty of light from the flash shots here to work with, so I'm not too worried about this. I'm just going to go through this super quick so you can see how this works. I'm not too worried about those windows either, so they don't really show any detail. So there's my ambient shot, and then here's the flash pop with the little sun pack off to the left that was kicking off the ceiling, as I showed you earlier. And then there's the flash over on the right there. Hang on, I'm going to plug in power here, Troy. I've got my power cable though, so it's not going to die on me. I got AC power tonight, so I'm good to go. There we go. All right, so let's go back. So I'll show you how this can actually work quite quickly. I'm going to select these 3. Just going to say edit as layers in Photoshop. And then this, I've got Photoshop already open, so this is going to spin now. I'm going to.
So Stephen, maybe you can answer this while you're doing that.
Sure,
Somebody asked, why would you not HDR this? I'm assuming these 3 files. Why would you not just HDR them?
Yeah, so the reason that I would not HDR them is that HDR, the problem with HDR is that HDR, not only, what I'm trying to manage here is the luminance of the scene, the brightness of the scene. What I don't want is the color balance to shift. I want everything to look as natural as possible. The problem with HDR, most HDR tools, is it not only changes the brightness and the luminance of the scene, but it shifts the colors all around as well. And so you start to get, when you start to stack multiple frames together with HDR, you not only get, muddy grays oftentimes and a weird wonky tonal curve, but it starts to shift the colors around. And if you're shooting in a very controlled environment, particularly for architecture, where you've got to nail the colors, you're not going to get there with HDR. It's just going to wonk out the colors too much. And so I'm going to actually go to my workspace here in Photoshop and make sure that I've got my photography workspace set up here. So here's my workspace. I've got my standard tools over here. And if you look, why didn't it open here? Let's see. It's just going to open up. I'm going to have to open this again.
So you're essentially doing a manual HDR, if you will.
Yes, that's correct.
You're blending the images manually.
That's correct.
And picking the areas that you want, which
Exactly.
I know that, like Jim Doyle, some of you may know Jim Doyle. That's how he does a lot of his architecture too. I mean, he shoots sometimes hundreds of images for a room,
right?
Lights under tables, lights behind things, and blends in just that specific area. So you could get really detailed if you wanted to.
That's exactly right. And that's what I'm going to do right here. So Troy, I've got my Wacom tablet right next to me. I highly recommend you guys get a Wacom tablet. I can't speak highly enough if you start to do this kind of work. A Wacom tablet is really, really nice for this. I've only been using one since November, and now I'd be lost without it. Right. I think Troy, you would echo that sentiment as well. So now what you see here is I've got my 3 images in a stack in layers. I've got my ambient here at the top. I've got one of the flash shots. There's the left flash shot, and there's the right flash shot, and I'm basically going to blend these really quickly. For you guys, I normally put my ambient shot on the bottom of the stack here, and then I'm going to basically create layer masks. So I'm going to hold down the Option key, click the layer mask button here. It's going to create a filled black layer mask for each of the flash shots here. And now all you see is the ambient shot. And then basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to just start actually painting in. I'm going to actually move the this flash layer. So this is my left flash layer. This is my right. I might rename this. This is left flash, so L flash, so I know what's what, which way I'm going to paint. And then this is my right flash. And you'll see how fast this actually goes. I'm just going to pull in some gradients. This is my base layer. Okay. So first thing I might do, you'll notice that the bottom of the scene is pretty dark. So the first thing I might do here, actually I need to remove these layer masks because I need to align these and it won't work. This is a key point. If you have a layer mask, you cannot do auto align layers. So you've got to do that first. Oops, cancel. Don't want that. Come back here. Yeah, Photoshop will not be able to so I'm going to shift select all of these guys, and then I'm going to go over to where are we here? Auto align layers out of edit.
Edit auto align layers.
And then I'm going to just select auto with the thing in the center. So the one at the far left, that's the projection. I'm going to just do this auto one that it defaults to. And now if there's any little shift in between my successive frames on my geared head, it's going to align those so that they'll all be perfect alignment. And sometimes if you can see at the very, very side here, if there's a little bit of a line here, and at the very bottom, you can see that it's shifted very, very slightly. But it's key that you do that. Now I can add my layer mask in. I'll just do that very quickly here, and very quickly here. So now we're back at ambient. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up the G key. I'm going to pull a gradient just straight up from the bottom here of white. So I've got white over here. Remember that in a layer mask, white reveals and black conceals. So I've got white here set up for my foreground color. I can switch to the background color with the X key. So I'm just going to basically pick the G key and pull up a gradient here. And as I pull up this gradient, you can basically see, I usually use an opacity of about 6 to 10% for this masking work. So as I pull up this gradient, just straight up, you hold down the shift key, it'll pull up straight. You can start to see I'm lightening up the bottom of the photograph a bit here. And this just gives me the control I want. I can also hold down the shift key and come in from the corner at 45 degrees. So I can now basically pull in, you can see that the wall is starting to get lighter. And I can pull in a little bit from the couch and lighten up the couch here at the lower left corner. And what you see here then is you can see in the layer mask that I'm starting to get shades of gray at the bottom that are revealing the light from this flash layer that the layer mask is adjacent to. So we're starting to pull in some light here. I can also just pull in a linear gradient this way. You can see as I pull in this gradient, it starts to get lighter. And I'll go to my top layer now, and I'll do the same thing on the right. So I'm just going to basically pull a gradient in from the right here. And you can see as I basically pull in these gradients, we're starting to blend in. Oops. starting to blend in the light from those layers. So you can see it coming in here like that.
So what is your average edit time for a job? You know, some images are going to require a little more touching than others. So when you do this with a job, what would you say a normal house? How long does it take you?
Oh, it takes me probably a couple hours. I'm still pretty slow and meticulous, and I'm going to show the gang here real quick how I strip out color. I'm just going to finish this real quick. Some guys are really fast. Some guys can do a job in an hour of, say, 20 images. And again, pulling gradients is a fast way to do this. This is why I was kind of showing that to you guys here. I'm actually going to paint in a little bit here with my brush. I'm going to hit my brush tool, and then I'm just going to give you guys an idea. But you can see how much light I brought in here. I'm going to set my brush size here with the bracket key so you can start to see the brush get bigger. So I'm just going to paint in here on the top layer some light from the left and right. So I'm going to select my layer mask here on the right. And as I just, oops, that's not what I wanted. Okay. I'm on the, why is that doing that? What's going on here? Oh, smoothing. I've got the wrong tool here. Let's see. Nope. What's going on? Smoothing. Oh, you got a hard brush. That's the problem. You want a nice soft brush, okay, for this type of work. So for some reason, the wrong tool was selected here. Let's see. Here's my brush. I had the pencil tool. There we go. All right. So here's my brush. My tablet is pressure sensitive here. My flow, I only want about 6% or so here to control this. All right, so now I've got a nice soft brush, and now I can very gently, as you can see here, I can brush in the light from the right side here. I'm just going to do this super quickly so you guys get a feel for it. I'm not going to be super anal retentive about this, but you can see I can paint in some light from that right wall flash, blend it in very smoothly and easily. Blend in some light onto the stereo system here. And I'm just using very light pressure here and painting this in. I'm starting to get some light here in the little alcove area. Like that. Then I can go down real quick and just, I'm going to finish this up in a few seconds. And then I can take my lower, and I can just basically blend in some light along the wall there. Again, you can do this with gradients or the brush, whatever you prefer. And now you can see we're starting to get things filled in here really nicely. Get some light here from the left coming in.
So we have a question.
Yeah.
Why not just use a brush to paint white into the areas that you want to brighten?
You can.
I'm not quite sure the question, so I'm wondering, like, is it instead of just like doing a dodge and burn over the file?
So what I'm doing basically, Troy, is I'm blending in the light from the flash with the white for the layer mask. So I'm basically revealing the light from this flash layer, the left flash layer, and then the right flash layer. So if I select the right flash,
So to the question, I mean, you can't just paint white over the file, over the actual image, because it'll muddy everything up. Because the way that Steven's doing it now, it's affecting the entire contrast of the image because he's revealing an image that's lit underneath that actually has shadows and tones and colors. And
exactly right. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
So, see, I didn't want to do that because get back there. See, I'm actually painting on the. I want to be painting on my layer mask here. But yeah, so I'm just painting with the brush in the layer mask to reveal the light that is in the image that had the flash layer on top of the ambient, right? So if I turn these off, there's my original, right? And I painted in now the light and blended that. So this isn't perfect, but I want to show you guys very quickly how I do a color adjustment. But you guys get the idea here, and you can play with this to your heart's content, right? I would probably blend this a little bit more. Maybe here on the left a little bit, fill this in a little bit down here, just to even things out. You'll notice that we've got a little bit of a color shift here between this side, the right side, and the left side, that you can correct that easily enough in post. You can see how we can kind of blend these, right? So when you kind of look at where we started, right? We started with this, and we basically, by painting in the flash layers with layer masks, you can see how we've now got a much more natural looking scene. We've still got some shadow, logical shadows here on the left side of the speaker, the right side of the speaker. It still looks normal and natural. Again, with the light from the flash here, if I want to paint in a little bit of light here on that speaker, I can basically just go in, paint in a little bit there to reveal a little bit more of that, so you can see how that works.
So when you're photographing a room like this and you're putting lights in the room, are you thinking about this exact process? Because
yes.
You know, if the right side of the speaker, because the left side is near the window and the right side is going to be in shadow, you've got to make sure that you're going to fill that naturally. So you're going to bounce a light in the what would be camera right, the behind the right, so you have detail. So
yes,
how many layers do you normally do in a room like this one? You just gave us an example where there's 3, a main and 2.
I would say 80% of the time it's just 3 layers, and maybe it's 4. Actually, oftentimes I can get away with 1 light, and I'll just have 2 layers, and then if I have to do a window pull, I'll have 3. So 80% of the time, it's at most 3 layers.
But the cool thing about this technique is you could literally do a layer like out the window, right? You could open the windows, and you could do an exposure for just the windows, and then if you wanted to get in there and turn the stereo on, and you wanted the LEDs to pop out, I mean, you could just get really crazy.
Yeah, exactly right. So you can see down here, if I pan down, you can see my preamps on, right? You can see the LED on the stereo and stuff like that. Right. So I was listening to music while I was doing this.
Of course you should.
Yeah. So, but again, this isn't perfect, but it gives you guys a flavor. What I want to show you is how I fix the color, because this is also really important. So I'm just going to spend a couple minutes showing you guys that. So basically, I would basically group these as a stack here, like that, and then I would just put them in a folder, and I would name that group exposure, EXP, right? And then on top of that, I would add another adjustment layer with curves, and I would hold down the Option key and click Auto here, and that's going to bring up this very cool little dialog, and you can see how much brighter it got. Sometimes I'll just use enhanced brightness and contrast. And look how it evened out the room right there. Boom. I could call that done if I wanted.
Can you show that step again? Oh,
yeah, absolutely. So all I've done here is I've created an adjustment layer for curves, and curves is a good way to neutralize color casts, right, Troy?
Yep, it's very powerful.
You're setting black points and white points with the curves tool, and so all I'm doing when I bring up the curves adjustment thing is over here where it says auto, rather than just clicking the auto button, I hold down the Option key, and it brings up this little extra panel, correction options, and I can say find dark and light colors, and if I do that, that will remove probably 70% of my color casts just doing that alone, because it's finding these black and white points, and then it's basically evening out the image. So you can see by just doing that alone, we get rid of some color casts that we had up here and even things out. So you can turn that on and off, and you can see it's pretty subtle in here. And then, of course, if you want to, you can just make this luminosity, right? And then all it's going to affect is the luminosity in the room rather than the color. So that's one thing I do. The other thing I do, which is really cool, you guys have probably never seen this, I'm going to show you something really neat, is I'll add a hue saturation adjustment layer on top of that. This, for me, was a revelation when I saw this. So I've created another adjustment layer called hue saturation. It brings up this dialog box, and here's master. I select each one of these individually, and then I just take that saturation slider and I slide it all the way over to the right. And look at all the magenta contamination in that room. You would never think that this room was not neutral after just looking at the photograph, but it actually has all this color contamination in it that's magenta. Okay, and so how do I deal with it? I just slide this over the left, and now that's gone. And now I can bring in the blue, and there's all this blue contamination. Okay, now where is most of this blue contamination coming from? It's coming from the window off to the left here, that is kicking in a lot of daylight. Daylight has a lot of blue in it, and that's why you see so much blue over here to the left of the room that's coming in from this big picture window on the left here. So what do I do with that? I could just slide that over to the right. Now, I did have some blue in my scene in this little box here in my little Porsche Le Mans racing prototype. So I can, and in my photograph here, I can paint that into the layer mask later. But let's go do the cyans now. So I've got some cyan contamination here on the wall and the window, this reflection. So I can basically, and right over here, again, this is from the daylight because there's a cyan component to daylight. I can slide that off, and then I can check my greens. And I've got some contamination, not so much with the green. I don't think I'll really worry about that. I'll put that back to 0, okay? So now I've stripped out effectively most of the color contamination. I really don't worry about yellows and reds because with daylight, that gives a lot of color. For architectural, I would do that, but for real estate, I really wouldn't worry about that so much. But let me show you then how I would paint back in the color to those little objects in the room that are supposed to be blue or cyan. So I can just basically go in here. I can basically take my background color, which is black, and then I can just mask in by painting in black with my Wacom tablet. I can make this flow maybe 40%, like that. So this is faster. You don't have to be worried about being super precise about this with respect to this, but now I can paint in the color that I stripped out because I'm masking it with black. Let's get over here. Where are you? All right, here we go. So now there's the Porsche 908 coming back. It's with its Gulf wire colors. It's the blue and cyan that it should be. I can go back into my photograph here for Napa Valley and all the mustard, and I can paint the blue back in there on that, so you see the sky. Right, but what I've done is I've stripped out all the magenta, cyan, and blue and green contamination from the room, and then the room looks super clean with respect to the colors. Right, and then I can go back down here and I can paint in my Blu-ray discs in this little storage box. And come back in. So this is just super quick. I'm not going to really get super obsessive about this, but you guys get the idea. So if there's any content that you need to retain the color in, you can basically just mask that in with black after you've stripped out the color contamination. So if we rack out now to our full scene, now we see how clean and crisp that photograph looks. And again, that's just 2 flash layers, 1 ambient masked together, and then a very quick color correction. And you can see now how nice and crisp that looks. So that, in essence, is my workflow. You can see we've got nice, clean, neutral walls. We've got our colors where they should be. We don't have any color contamination. And we've got a nice, crisp, clean photograph. And then what I would do, just to finish that off real quick, is I would flatten that. And then I would go back and I would pull up my lens correction tool here. And then it's going to bring up my, I'm going to zoom in here a little bit. And so now what I can do is then use my controls to make sure that everything's straight. So I'll go over to custom and then simply, I usually correct the verticals. And there's a very fine grid. I don't know if you guys can see it on screen there, but I can basically make sure that any keystoning, I usually look for edges of walls like this line here, the picture frame, make sure everything's straight.
So Stephen,
yeah.
Why wouldn't you do the perspective correction in Lightroom or Capture One? Because
you can.
That okay.
You can. Absolutely, you can do that there. I sometimes do when I'm working really fast. The nice thing about this one is that sometimes you want to rotate the image just a fraction of a degree because it might be very slightly, like it looks like I need to rotate maybe 359.8 degrees here. So just 0.2 degrees to the left, because this window here looks like it's just slightly leaning very left. So I can just show you the control that you can get here. So I'll put in 0.8, right? And so that's just going to straighten that a little bit. And I can say, okay. So again, you can use the transform tools in Lightroom or Capture One as well. I'm just showing you how you would use this in the lens filter tool. So
the nice thing is that for anybody watching, of course, is that, you know, this is one of probably dozens and dozens and dozens of ways that you could build this.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. This is not absolute, but certainly very powerful tools. And it's always to see those extra steps we can take. Like, you know, I've been working in Photoshop a long time, and I always like watching somebody, you know, do something, because I had no idea that curves had that little auto picture. I'm like, yes, that is so freaking cool.
So again, I would, you know, I've still got a little bit of unevenness here at the top here, right? I would go in and make sure this is all perfectly square and straight, but you guys get the idea. I would probably fix my speaker. The nice thing about the lens correction is I can actually do a skew and transform it. You know, if this speaker, there's a little bit of, looks like barrel distortion here, I could fix that again with a lens correction filter. And I could also transform this and, you know, with the skew tool, basically I can go over and just fix anything that I want with, you know, I usually use skew to fix weird wonky stuff, right? So if I have to skew something, I could do it this way, or maybe pull up the ceiling a little bit like that, make it square, right, like that. You get the idea, right? And then just check the checkbox, right? So I've just straightened up part of the ceiling. Again, you guys have to get to know your equipment, what your lenses do, and then you'll know what to do with either the lens correction filter, the transform tool, or the simple transform tools in Lightroom or Capture One, which work well as well. It all depends on the scene you're shooting, the type of distortion you're fixing, whether you got your geometric correction perfectly right or not, whether the camera moved in between successive frames. You know, you can decide, but you've got, as Troy said, you've got multiple ways to fix these problems. And that's just one of them that I showed you. So there you can see, you know, what we ended up with, just real quick, how I would do that. And that's basically it.
Very cool. So how do you deliver to your client? So do you I mean, like, what is it, a JPEG? Is it a TIFF? Is it, what size do you give them?
That's a good question. It really depends on the client. For real estate, there's standards for, I'm just going to, while we talk here, I'm going to run a little slideshow for you guys in Lightroom so you can see a shoot that I did. This was an Airbnb shoot. And while this is running, I can kind of speak to Troy's question. But for real estate, MLS has guidelines in your given area. Typically, it's 1,500 pixels wide, 300 DPI JPEGs. Architects might want full-size 300 pixels per inch. If it's going to go into a publication like a magazine, they probably would want the TIFF file, the flattened TIFF file, Troy. It would depend on whatever the publication requirements were. So, of course, you're going to want to save all of your images as full-size TIFFs, 300 DPI, and then you're going to want to create a second set if they're going to be delivered on the web, typically 1,500 or 1,600 pixels wide at 300 DPI, and then 100% or 90% quality there. And then you can just deliver, you know, smaller size JPEGs. Like this is for Airbnb. This meets what you're seeing here is Airbnb's requirements, which was, I think, a standard aspect ratio like 16:9, 4:3, or 3:2 at 1,500 pixels wide, 300 DPI. So that's what you're seeing rolling on the screen right now.
Right. So when you sign the contract or you talk to your client, you guys pre-negotiate that. So you ask them, what do you need? Yes. And that could affect your price point, I'm assuming, because if you're going to be giving them higher, okay, right.
Exactly right. So normally, you know, when you give a bid to a client, you're going to have a standard rate sheet, and you're going to be clear, or you're going to check with the client on what their requirements for the product is. So you're going to negotiate that ahead of time and then deliver basically to the requirements. I kind of spoke about that at the beginning of the presentation. Understand what your customer's requirements are. Requirements are an unambiguous, measurable, verifiable definition of what the customer's needs are, right? And so, you know, for MLS, it's got to be 1,500 pixels wide, 300 DPI, a standard aspect ratio, that kind of thing. And then for a magazine, as you know, Troy, it might be an entirely different set of requirements. Right. It might be a TIFF file, you know, certain, it might be in a certain, Pro RGB or Adobe RGB, color space, gamut, whatever, whatever they need. Then you might have to do a CMYK conversion or have a consultant do that for you if they're going to go straight to litho or something. But generally, their editors will know how to do the RGB to CMYK conversion for print, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, it's usually specific per publication too.
Exactly right.
Their CMYK. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly right. So, but again, this is all getting to know your client and your customer base. You're going to need to do some legwork and understanding your customer's requirements. And again, I've got a background in this, but basically, you want to understand your customer needs clearly and unambiguously, understand their needs for what their expectations for the product are, and then deliver that. And, what you want, as you can see with these slides, you want to minimize the variance and the variability of your images. You want, for a given assignment, you want a very consistent, minimally variable set of images that look consistent from place to place, from room to room, from space to space. You can see that here. That's the nice thing about doing the color correction is I've done all of that here. You can see that the lighting, the color temperature, the colors, everything looks very consistent as you move through the house. It's all very even and consistent. There's not wild changes in color temperature. And again, this is the problem with HDR. It's very hard to control that with different lighting. Some of the real estate photographers have a joke they call HDR Clown Vomit because, you never know what you're going to get, with HDR. And when you're trying to deliver a consistent set of evenly lit images like you see here, right, it's difficult to do that with HDR because you never know what you're going to quite get with it per se. So this is why we use lights.
Right.
Yeah.
Very cool. Why don't you go ahead and stop the screen share?
Yep.
We'll wrap up with a couple questions. We're about 20 minutes over, but that's okay. We got all that there. So perfect. So we had a couple questions. One, somebody wanted to know what kind of speakers you had there. Are those Revels?
No, they're not Revels. They're Dyn Audio.
Okay.
Yeah, they look like Revels.
Yeah. And then Rebecca said, for indoors, I noticed that the angle for images seems rather low, like waist level.
Yeah, so that has been a learning curve for me because most architectural and real estate photographers, designers shoot pretty low, lower than you would think. Generally 3.5 to 4 feet high. Some folks will say, most folks are on average about 5'10", most men, average 5'9", 5'10" ballpark, and they'll say that they'll put the camera between their waist and their chest level. I've actually gotten some feedback from my local real estate agent that I'm shooting too low. I'm going, well, I'm shooting based on how I was training, going, I don't care, it's too low. I want you to raise the camera. So again, this gets back to knowing your customer's needs clearly and what their expectations are, and shooting the way that your clients expect, right? So don't fall into the trap of groupthink. An example is I shot a bedroom at a beautiful house, and all the pros on the Facebook group were saying, like, the camera's too high, lower the camera. I showed it to one of the best real estate agents in the East Bay, and he goes, that shot is perfect, don't change a thing.
Right. So you gotta,
You gotta
for the client, you
shoot for the client and understand what are the client's needs and expectations, and that's your guide.
Fantastic.
So all those things are rules of thumb, but really understand what your customer's needs are. The best way is to sit down with them and just try to get clear and unambiguous requirements of what they expect, why they expect what they expect.
Perfect. Well, I think that's going to be a wrap, Stephen. I appreciate you coming on, and thank you everybody for being tolerant of us going over. And, for my weird intro, as I was sitting in traffic on the 91, for those of you that know that right there at the 241, and it was crazy. It was crazy.
I have a question for you, Troy.
Yes, sir.
Is that an anvil behind you?
Yeah, of course. Doesn't everybody have an anvil? It's an 80-pound anvil.
That's great.
60-pound anvil, yeah.
I am not surprised at all that you have an anvil in your studio.
Well, I got to tell you, so I didn't want like normal background stuff. So I've got pots that I made back there. And I thought, you know what? Nobody's got an anvil.
No, that's great.
That's it. I'm putting an anvil in.
Yeah. So, hey, Thank you, everybody. This was the IEPPV Live with Stephen Scharf, Architectural Photography. I will put tons of his information in the show notes with tons of links. All the products and everything are going to be in there, so don't worry about that. If you missed that, we're going to have that. On a regular basis, we're going to be doing IEPPV Live, so make sure you check the IEPPV website at IEPPV.com. Check that calendar. And I am Troy from SpicyJello.com. You can find these videos on Spicy Jello's YouTube channel under IEPPV, and we also have some videos on the IEPPV YouTube channel as well. In a couple weeks, we're going to be doing our image competition live. We're going to be doing it online. We will be managing that from Moab, so that's going to be really exciting. But we're going to get through everything, so that's going to be good. So you guys can make sure to check back. So if you have any questions, you can always email me, Troy at IEPPV.com or Troy at SpicyJello.com. And if you need to get in touch with any of these guys, I can always put you in contact with them.
Yeah, my info's in the presentation notes there.
Right. And Stephen and I are also on the TWIP Pro community, which is thisweekinphoto.com, and it's a great little community. If it's
it really is
checking out, yeah, it's great. So thank you guys for joining me. I'm going to stop the recording. You're welcome to hang out and chat for a little bit after, but so far, take care.